Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for the Peace of Wellness podcast. My name is Kirsten Larsen. I am your host, and I am bringing two different gentlemen together to talk about a different topic on each podcast. Today's is actually a pretty heavy one. It's going to be focusing on grief and managing grief after a parent or parents plural have passed. And up for this challenge today, I have two lovely gentlemen. I have Chef Pete Gioni. I'm used to calling you Chef Pete, so it's hard to remove that. And I have Billy Bob Jackson. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Just know that I'm not going to cook on the show.
I wish you were. Actually, that would be my two dreams coming true, being able to talk to people and being fed at the same time. That
Then you got to do a food podcast.
I know. So we'll get to this, but I actually would love to be highlighting different restaurants in Las Vegas as we're talking. You know, that's like down the road. That's the dream.
Oh, no, we're going to do that today, too.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. That's our surprise. That's our surprise. So the way I'm starting off each podcast is to actually ask each gentleman to share what their superpower is. So what is something that makes you special and or unique? And feel free to jump in, either one. You want to start?
You want to go, Pete?
I can take it. Sure.
What's your superpower, Pete?
So I got two things about my personality. One is that I'm very persistent. Uh-huh. The other one is I'm a chronic philanthropist. I raise a lot of money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Mm-hmm. But I'd say that really my superpower, which I'm very grateful for this opportunity, I've been a chef for 30 years, and I really got into organic food. And then I was asked by some cancer patients if I'd cook for them. The first gentleman had lung cancer 3 times. It came back every 7 months to a year.
Wow.
In November of 2009, 2 weeks after his last surgery, he asked me to cook for him. So I started to cook, and I used organic ingredients, low glycemic food, and a lot of anti-inflammatories. So the doctors had predicted from November 2009 that he had a 2% chance to live past 2012. And I cooked for this guy twice a day for 3 years, and still to today, his cancer's never come back.
Wow.
Then there's another gentleman with
incurable... What a testimonial.
Right. And then there's another gentleman with incurable leukemia. And that's how I got connected to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society.
Sure.
But he was given 2 months to 2 years when I met him. And he just celebrated 14 years. And he's doing well. He still has leukemia, but it's very well managed. So very grateful for those opportunities to really help people.
That's amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, something to follow up there.
I should have went first. I was sitting here as he was talking. I'm like, dang, I should have went first. I don't have nowhere near that kind of superpower. Oh my God, Pete.
You do have that superpower. It maybe just hasn't been quite illustrated, or really.
He's a real life superhero.
Been able to shine yet? No, I know.
I was going to say my superpower. I feel like is making people smile.
Yeah.
I feel like I can make people smile, which is probably why I chose stand-up comedy. They may not all laugh, but I at least make them smile. Yeah.
And I feel like I can attest to both of these things about both of you, you know. Chef Pete, I've known for a few years now, actually. I met through a mutual friend. And then I met Billy Bob through a mutual friend probably a year or so ago. Yeah. And so I do love those. And again, this podcast is really geared towards highlighting men and, providing a platform to really allow you all to have unique conversations and whatnot. But I think it's important that you all get to kind of like toot your own horn a little bit. So I like those. Well, now we're actually going to dive into this big topic of grief. And I'm curious, so both of you have been invited here today because you have had at least one parent pass away. And that's what kind of prompted this my desire to have a conversation on really kind of what managing grief looks like, feels like. So if you would please share, tell us a little bit about the relationship you had with your parent, and then if you were, how close you were, that kind of thing, who passed. So we'll start with that.
I'm going to go before Pete.
You get this one.
I'm going before Pete. So I recently lost my dad.
Yeah.
It's been 3 months today, actually.
Wow.
He passed on June
Oh
18th.
my gosh.
And it was like, I would say the initial feeling was just shock, but we were really close.
Yeah.
My dad, I'm from Baltimore originally, as you know.
I love Baltimore.
Yeah, you spent some time in B-more. My dad moved here a couple years after me moving here, and it was because his health took a toll. So I was more of like his caregiver.
Oh, I see.
For his final years.
Okay. So he was here with you. He wasn't back in Baltimore.
He was back in Baltimore.
At the end.
Yeah, at the end he was here with me.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
And what amount of time was that kind of transpired?
So I've been in Vegas 7 years. He's been here 5.
Okay.
So 2 years he was without me. He was kind of doing his own thing, but then his health started declining.
Okay.
And then he moved here, and then his health just continuously declined. And I was kind of the one that was there for him.
Well, and that's something that I think that we'll talk a little bit about with both of you is whether you kind of knew that this was coming and had some time to prepare, or if it was sudden. And so even though I feel like we want to remain hopeful and maybe be in denial that it's coming. Yeah. There's a certain point where we kind of see the writing on the wall in some situations,
yes.
It's kind of coming.
Yeah. And that was true for me too. It's something that you could try to prepare for.
Sure.
You could just keep in mind, and you could start making little provisions and stuff like that, but it was still a shock.
I'm sure.
Especially when it happened. It was just like, it was total shock. But mentally I had started preparing myself for, hey, I don't know how much time my dad has left.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was just challenging to watch everything, because everything just kind of hit him, and it just was like one thing after another, another. And then the hospital said, hey, look, we're going to be releasing him, make provisions. So we're like, all right, cool. I'm trying to find caregivers. So when he come home, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're like, yeah, he went into cardiac arrest. We did everything.
Wow.
Nothing we could do. And I was like, oh. And it honestly wasn't even real when I got the call.
Oh, I believe
it wasn't
that.
real until I got to the hospital and saw him.
Yeah.
And that's when it was like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's actually an interesting idea too, because not everyone is able to see their loved one, right? Like to your point, sometimes the circumstances are such that, I feel like that gave you maybe a little bit of closure or like finality with it to kind of accept it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have that depending on the circumstances of, how the person passed.
That's
so
true. That's
a tough one. But Chef Pete, do you want to share what
Sure.
your relationship was?
Yeah. So, when I was 17, I grew up in Shelton, Connecticut, near New Haven area. After I went to culinary school in Burlington, Vermont, I just kind of never went back home. So there was a period where I didn't see my parents for several years, and then my mom was always the nurturer, and she was a pediatric nurse for over 20 years, right? So you could ask her any advice. She would give you advice, and it was always like a take it or leave it. She's not offended if you don't take her advice or whatever. She had great suggestions. So having a little kid, it was nice to have her to get advice from.
Yeah.
And my dad was always. We had a good relationship, but it was also at times it was tough. It was challenging. He was a hard ass. And then as I grew up, stayed away longer, the relationship got a little bit better because there wasn't that pressure that he put on me. It was more of, I could always count on him to send me the score of the Yankee game. And so what's really ironic is that in the beginning of the show, I talked about cooking for people with cancer. So I started that, like I said, November 2009. In January 2010, my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Oh, wow.
So she was back there, and I was in Las Vegas, and they put her on a maintenance dose. She had a huge softball-sized tumor on her ovary.
Wow.
And they found it because she had fluid on her lungs. So you figure there's something going on with her lungs, but then they do a head scan, and there's nothing there. And they found some tumor cells in the fluid. So then they find out that it's in her ovaries. And they did a maintenance dose. They tried to reduce the size of the tumor, and then they did surgery. And then they kept her on a maintenance dose of chemo for 2 years. And so towards the end of 2012, towards the end of 2011, I should say, she gave up on the chemo. She's like, I can't be a wife anymore. I can't be a husband or a mother. So she just, and she's going to be a grandmother, right? She was just stuck in bed and she withered away to nothing.
Yeah.
So she gave up chemo in November, and then, March. And I was going back home to see her every month because I knew that was going to be one of the last times. And it was tough because every time I said goodbye to her, I didn't know if it was going to be the last time.
Sure.
And, she was really religious, went to church by the book, the sweetest woman, taking care of children. And just to see her suffering for those 2 years and to see how she, got to the end, it was tough to see that.
Yeah.
And of course, making, like going out and picking out her plot, going out and picking out the casket and different things like that and showing it to her is like really, really unreal.
Yeah.
And having those conversations with her. And then, I was at home. It was a Saturday, and my dad called and said she passed away. She was at home. They had just brought in a hospital bed so she could move up and down a little bit better. It was out in the living room. She spent one night in that and passed away the next day.
Wow.
So that's just like you say, it's like, it's coming, right? But you're just like, whoa, I can't believe it. Like this is real.
Yeah.
But
I think it's human nature to just hold on to the tiniest shred of hope, like if we don't have hope, what do we have? Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that in these situations we're like, but there's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of a chance that something different could happen,
Right.
Right. But the one thing that I felt at the moment was because we had so much distance between us physically, is that I felt spiritually she was a lot closer.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So fast forward 3 years till 2015, my dad he took care of her through the chemo. They've been married for over 30 years. And he had heart problems, for the last few years that he was alive, but he sent a text message out one morning after a terrible snowstorm in Connecticut and just said, no mas, no mas. And I said, what, too much snow? And it was a group text message. He replied, yeah. Okay. A little while later, I get a call from one of my family. It was such a blur. I can't even remember who it was, but he had shot himself in the head and left a note that he wanted to go back and be with my mom.
Wow.
So that one, there was one that was really predictable that it was coming. And then there was the other one, like, where did this come from?
Wow.
Where did this come from? So he had everything planned. He had sent me an insurance premium in the mail. So I got it several days after he was gone. He said, pay this and get that kind of thing.
Wow.
He had everything laid out on his kitchen table. He had no food in the house. He threw away like a lot of our family albums. And so we lost a lot with that too.
My
but
gosh.
so he had a plan figured out for quite a bit of time. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a shock.
Yeah. And talk about two very different kinds of heartbreak,
Right.
like very different kinds.
Yeah.
And it's tough because, I'm very close. Both of my parents are 70. I'm really close to my parents. The idea of anything happening to them just devastates me, just the idea, right? And so I feel like I kind of wrestle with this, like, would you rather it be this long drawn out thing where you have all this time, but you're having to have the person pick out a plot and, plan the funeral and everything, versus just this horribly sudden, shocking thing, They're both just kind of two different kinds of atrocious, So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I'm curious, I can imagine, I can imagine how I would maybe feel, but I'm curious how you both felt immediately after your parent had passed and then kind of how that's evolved over time. Do you feel, and yours of course is much shorter, however, still relevant. And I know yours has been several years for them. However, I don't think that those things ever leave us,
Right.
So I'd be curious, have you really kind of seen any shift or evolution in how you've felt in the last 3 months or?
Oh, for sure. I think in the beginning it was just shocking. And then after the shock, it was almost like, all right, this happened. Now what?
Yeah.
And because I had to do everything, it was almost like, all right, now we're from Baltimore. So now it's like I have to plan a funeral. My dad requested to be cremated, so finding a crematory place.
And
to
he
do
had
that.
not had any of that planned. So then it fell on you.
Yeah,
Is that right?
It was all
Yeah.
on me. He didn't have nothing written out, no will. He had like a life insurance policy through his job he retired from, and then he had another one he had got from like a broker or whatever.
Sure.
And but yeah, everything I had to do everything. I had to go and sit with the people, and they had to like, oh, well, what kind of box you want to put him in? I'm like, I don't know, what kind of box?
Yeah.
But then I'm thinking about the service, so now I'm like, all right, well, it got to be something presentable for the service, and so just doing all that. And the thought of, oh shucks, I'm gonna have to fly with my dad's ashes back to Baltimore.
Yeah.
To do this service. And now, as a comedian, I'm thinking like, oh man, this is like, I'm like, there has to be a God. You know what I'm saying? Because like the sense of humor that God had to be able to say, all right, now you got to take care of your dad.
You're going to have to transport that man.
You got to travel with your dad
yep.
across country, and then have his service, and then come back. And so it took a while. It was a lot of it was a lot of emotional roller coasters, because grief can hit you at any time.
Sure.
And I realized that it would be times where I used to talk about my wife because we would watch a movie, and if it was a sad movie, she would cry.
Yeah.
And I would laugh like, oh, you crying? It's just a show. It's just a movie. And then we were watching a show, and a character's mom passed, and I had a tear flowing down my face, and she looked over at me, and she's like, oh, look who's crying now.
That's right. Like, how do you like that, sir?
Yeah. So I was like, man, I guess depending on circumstances, those things could change. So now I'm more mindful of how
it's softened your heart a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah. Now I'm a little more mindful of how I pick.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was challenging. A lot of different emotions you feel. The greatest advice I received after my dad passed was from my old pastor in Baltimore. He said, grieve like a son. And he said, grief is going to come in waves. He said, when the wave comes in, ride the wave. Be okay with just being in that moment.
Yeah.
And then once it's over, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
And I did that. Whenever it hit me, I took my time and I dealt with it. I didn't try to, oh, I'm a man, I got to push through this. And I didn't push through it. I allowed myself time to really grieve as a son. And I'm glad I did that.
No, that's really important. And wise words from your pastor, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that. What about you, Chef Pete?
So right after my mom died, it was, I had a lot of regret, thinking that I should have done more for her. And knowing that I was cooking for some people that were doing really, really well out here. So it's like, man, I should have done that for her.
Yeah.
And actually, I created a website, and I was putting up a lot of recipes for it because I knew I had to get recipes to my dad to cook for my mom. And then you see that 1.6 million people a year are diagnosed with cancer. So it's like, let's help everybody, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just a selfish thing. That's, and at the same time though, she passed away 2 weeks after I separated from my ex-wife.
Oh,
so there was the divorce thing happening, and then she passed away all at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
and talk about, I always say too, like losing a person, whether they're still alive or not, like a relationship like that ending is still a grieving process.
Right. Right.
A loss is a loss.
Right.
And sometimes it's just as devastating that they're out there living life without you now, in a different way.
Yeah.
So talk about a lot of loss there.
Yeah. Well, they say that the three biggest stressors in life is divorce, loss of a loved one, and moving.
Yeah.
And all those were happening at the same time. So, so it was a lot. And I've had drinking problems several times in my life. And luckily I was sober through all of that, sober through my marriage, her passing, the divorce. So I think I had a more of a clear head to deal with some of this stuff.
Sure.
But really the first thing I did was go back to work. I was like, I got to stay busy. I can't be sitting around thinking about this.
Yeah.
I think I pushed off a lot of grieving. I didn't take that, I shoved it down and just kept going and plowing through life. The one thing that really helps me to deal with that is to help other people. And, I've got this way that I live by is that I will give everybody information for free. Cooking is my career. It's how I support my family, but that information is free. And if I actually have to cook for you and buy food, if there's a cost to it, that's one thing, but I will give you everything I know. And because I feel like my mission is to help families stay together, healthy and happy and longer.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So that's what came out of that one. When my dad passed away so suddenly, there was like more anger.
Yeah.
And I was not sober at the time either. So I really punished myself with that anger. And so that was a different grieving
beast
process.
entirely, for sure.
Is why did he do this? Why did he leave us? Why didn't he say something? Why didn't I ask more questions?
Yeah.
Why didn't I go spend more time with the guy knowing that he doesn't have his wife anymore? So, what did I own in that situation? What could I have done differently? Why did he do things the way that he did? And so that one was a much different process.
How do you feel like you have, now that there's been some time and space, that was like 9 years ago, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel like the evolution of acceptance has been with that? Have you gotten through to kind of the other side of some forgiveness for yourself and forgiveness for him? Or
do
we just ignore it and pretend it didn't happen?
Yeah. With my mom, I think I cope well with it, but until there's like a life event that happens where I want them there.
Sure.
So then it's just like, man, if I were to get married again, my parents wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And so to be kind of, there's a lot of loneliness in life.
Yeah.
There's no backup plan to go back to your parents and say, I need some help here. It's like you're on your own and that's it.
Yeah.
And it was, both of them within 3 years. With my dad, I still battle that relationship, and people ask about my childhood, and it's like, I don't know. And it just, I feel like I didn't really know his true character. And I got more information about him after he passed away.
Wow.
Then it's just like, man, so I feel a little deceived in a way.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of that I feel.
You're still wrestling with.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And I don't think there's any way to really settle that score with him because he's gone.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think that's what is, interesting about grief or managing it, is that in the day to day, we are busy, you're working, you're doing kind of the everyday, just normal activities. But like you said, it's those events and like monumental life, events or like milestones that you really miss and long for that person's presence, and those will just continue throughout our lives. Of course, we're going to be having these different things, but I'm curious too about something that Billy Bob had touched on is, this idea that it's like, well, you're a man, just kind of buck up and get through it and whatnot. I personally feel like just our society does so much to try to be present for a person immediately after someone passes, right? You're getting food, you're getting flowers, you're getting all of these things. But then literally day by day by day, that disappears. And I think that, of course, those first few days or first week is really tough, but I can only imagine how much tougher the next month is, or the next 6 months, or the next year, where you don't have that support. And it's kind of like, oh, well, that happened 3 months ago, but it's still living within you, And so I feel like it would be really tough to kind of wake up in the aftermath with really kind of no one caring that this valuable, amazing human to you is still gone, And if you all feel like there was ever really kind of that messaging of like, number one, you're a man, just kind of get through it. And or number two, it's just like, oh, well, that was then. So now is now. You kind of just got to keep moving,
I feel like society now is a little bit definitely more compassionate towards that.
Yeah.
Like you said, though, for a limited time.
Yeah.
And I think for a man, it's just like you can grieve and be sad and complain and whine and do all that for a period of time. and then people don't want to hear it anymore.
Sure.
Then you get labeled as, this guy's too depressed. He's too, too
Emotional
negative, too emotional.
He's a simp.
Yeah.
That's the new
Yeah.
word.
So I feel like that's the way that it works. And and I think that there's a very short grace period to do that, like you said. And then after that, it's like, you got to get back to work. You got to get back to supporting a family. You got to, all these other responsibilities that you can't push off anymore.
Right.
And then otherwise you're labeled as, he's falling apart.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you feel similarly about that, Billy Bob?
Yeah, that's true. I do feel like the world is a lot more compassionate, like you said, right now. But I feel like there's an expiration date on how long you have to be sad.
Yeah.
Like, all right, because eventually, like, it's like you have to move on.
Right.
Because
again, the bills keep coming.
Yeah, and society knows, like, hey, you have to move on. Like, we're gonna be patient with you. We're gonna allow you to go through what you're going through, but they're like, all right, how long?
Right.
How long you gonna stay here?
Right.
So, and I feel like to an extent, it's needed. I feel like you need somebody to say
propulsion.
Yeah, because I think about my dad, right? My dad was that person if he saw you sad, he'll let you be sad.
Yeah.
But he ain't gonna let you stay sad forever.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, come on, let's go have a drink. Hey, come on, let's go hang out. Let's go grab something to eat. Let's go lift your spirits up.
Yeah.
Because I can't allow you to stay in this sunken place,
Do you feel like recognizing that in him, it makes you want to be that more for other people? Or, do you feel like you want to kind of fulfill that role, or do you just appreciate that had been kind of who he was?
All my life, I felt like I was similar to my dad. I helped a lot of people because I saw him help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Since he's passed, I've been more, let me help me.
Yeah.
Let me apply everything he was giving everybody else to myself. Like, how do I help me get to where he was trying to push people to go?
Sure.
And I've often helped so many people that sometimes I would tell people close to me, I say, you know what? I need a me for me. Like what I am to other people.
I think he can relate to this quite a bit, because he is also a man who overextends himself for others. So,
and it's like sometimes you need somebody, because I like just like when we met that time, and I told you what I saw.
Yeah.
And it's like sometimes I'll see for other people, but it's sometimes hard to see for me.
For sure.
So sometimes I wish I had a me for me. So I've been spending more recent time becoming a me for me. So I've been looking at myself like, all right, well, how can I help me?
Yeah.
Looking at what I have going on, how can I make me better?
Yeah.
Well,
so. I love this. Really just kind of thinking about how has their passing really affected you, or what kind of gems have you taken from it, and really wanted to do to either kind of change your own habits or, routines, or just kind of work on some sort of personal development within yourself. So I feel like for you, you're saying that it's made you want to focus more on how you can help yourself, and put yourself first in some situations. What about you?
For me, I helped so many people better, because when I was a private chef, I helped people other than cancer. It was, little girl with tons of food allergies. She had vitiligo, other people with heart conditions and diabetes and obesity. So there was a good mix of, using food to help support these people in different ways.
Yeah.
But once I got back into drinking again, then it was just like, okay, finally I realized I need to take care of my own disease before I could take care of anybody else.
Sure.
Because I was losing myself helping other people, thinking that was the solution. Now that it's been 7 years since I quit, I take helping other people as therapy for me. It gets me out of my own head. And I know that other people are counting on me, that I can make a difference in somebody's life, even if they don't know my name. I'm perfectly fine with that. But because it makes me feel good, I like to say that if you want to be rewarded, you go out and do something great for yourself. Go run a race, win a medal, do something like that. But if you want to feel rewarded, you get that by helping other people. And so that's really where it keeps me strong, by doing that. And so I do overextend myself, because I'm terrible at saying no. But, a lot of times it's like, if people ask, it's because they need the help.
Sure.
And you can see through the people that don't, because they're lazy or don't want to do something just because. But, and those might get shoved off to the side. But the people that really ask, nonprofits that ask, friends that ask, people that ask, they do it because they need the help.
Yeah.
And I like to be there. I like to do what I say I'm going to do for people too. So that's what I think helps me deal
Has
with.
kind of come, yeah.
Yeah, with loss and regret and all that stuff.
As you are both really strong supports for other people, do you feel like you have and had supports through these losses? Do you feel like you had them when they occurred and in the, following months or for you years, but do you feel like you've gotten that support from people?
Yeah, definitely have gotten support from people, family, friends. Yeah, I've definitely gotten support.
And what has that looked like for you? Like, what is the support that you've received?
So most times it's just, hey man, they just call and check on me, or I'll get a random text, say, hey, just checking on you, seeing how you doing. And I'm one of those people where if you call to check on me or text me, I'm like, I'm good. How you? And they like, no, don't worry about me.
Yeah.
I'm checking on you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
Okay, good.
And it's like, okay. And that felt good. It was just like, okay, they just want to know how I'm doing.
Yeah.
So that felt good. We've had people bring food by the house.
Okay, good.
So we not having to stress about cooking.
Yeah.
Even recently, my mom, it was a delayed trip, but my mom and her mom, so my mom and my grandma came for like 3 weeks.
Oh.
And spent 3 weeks with us because, I also had a new baby. So
yes,
10 days after the new
Congratulations.
baby, thank you. 10 days after the new baby, Pops passed. So it's just
Yeah.
like, my mom was like, all right, let me come. We'll help you out with the baby. They've
Yeah.
been cleaning, cooking. And I mean, it was a blessing for 3 weeks.
Oh, huge.
So
Yeah.
that type of support was phenomenal.
Yeah. Nothing better than a mom with a new baby. Like our moms with a new baby. That assistance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
So yeah.
Did you feel like you had the support?
To the most extent, no. There's been a few key people that did some significant things for me. But other than that, especially when my mom passed, just separating from the ex-wife and, kind of not really starting over, but trying to figure things out from there. And that happened. And then, oddly, people don't want to bring food to a chef. They feel a little intimidated by that. But
It's true. You'd probably be the last person I'd bring something homemade to.
but I tell you what, we're the first ones to be grateful that we didn't have to cook.
I believe that. I believe that.
It's like if you rub your own feet, it feels good. But when somebody else does it for you, you're like,
Feels
this
amazing.
Is a life,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I never complain about that. I never judge people because I'd starve. And so I'm really grateful for that. But so I didn't really feel the community support in a way. The gentleman that I was cooking for when my mom passed, gave me some extra time off and, it was just kind of let me do my thing.
Sure.
That's good.
When my dad passed, that was kind of an empty, lonely time. And I felt isolated pretty much because I was drinking a lot too. I isolated myself in a way. So there wasn't a whole lot. And I was living in Illinois at the time and I was only there for a short period of time. So I didn't have a whole lot of,
supports
I didn't have
there
a
to begin
network out
with. Yeah.
there.
And that was actually going to be my question for you is I wondered if you were really opening up to people or if
Not
you
at
had
all.
allowed very many people to even know what was going on, because I know for a lot of gentlemen that, there are people that would like to support you, but you are I'm good. How are you? And not even really opening up about it being a tough time. I think just that vulnerability is, of course, like kind of frowned upon in some ways societally for men, of course. But then there's also the piece that like you are just trying not to wallow and trying not to dwell. And you're like, I've been in a situation myself where literally, even though I was suffering terribly, the last thing I wanted to do was actually tell someone about it on the phone, because I was, if by some miracle I wasn't already thinking about it and being upset about it, I certainly didn't want to bring it up to someone and then think about it and be upset about it, And so I have had those really tough times where I just wanted to try to get through by any means possible. And that didn't really include looping in family and friends.
Right.
Because that is tough to do as it is, you
I
know?
feel like, sometimes when you're feeling that heavy weight inside, you feel like you're a burden if you put that on somebody else.
Yeah.
And then there's also those other people that know you're going through something heavy and they're intimidated by that.
Sure.
And they don't really feel like, I don't want to hear the story. I don't know how to help this person, you know, and I think the one thing that I always ask people is when they, going through a loss or something heavy like that is how can I help you? Because if I just think that if I bring you food, that's help, but you need something else.
Yeah.
It's not helpful to that person. Right. So it's please tell me what you need. And so that you feel like I'm helping as opposed to just taking a guess. But
I love this point because I actually have a good friend here that, anytime something's going on with me, she will literally say, how can I support you? Or how can we support you? You know? And I don't know if I've ever even really taken her up on anything, but it's just the fact that she's asking means the world. And again, it's not making assumptions about what I would or could want when what she thinks could be different than what I do want and whatnot. But I think that is one thing that's hugely helpful is people just simply asking, but back to the idea of being a burden. That's really hard for Coach K to pass up because I feel like that prevents so many people from opening up and allowing others to help. You both have shared how much you love to help others, right? It's fulfilling. It feels amazing. Like you've built a piece of your identity, both of your identities on helping others, right? So the idea that you wouldn't allow others that opportunity is a little backwards,
selfish.
Is it not? Yes, it's a little backwards. So I think it's really important. I just like to take this opportunity that, or to say that, I feel like feeling like a burden is so common. But that is really what prevents deeper connections from being made. Me opening up to this friend and allowing her to be that for me makes her feel good, and it strengthens our connection too. So I think that we all, have a responsibility to kind of look at that differently and reframe it. A lot of what I do in my coaching is reframing our distorted thoughts. And that's a distorted thought that we are burdensome,
But, since then, because it's been so long, is that I open up about a lot of things and it, probably makes me sound vulnerable and people are like, I would never say that. How could you say that? But, I deal with, or I talk about addiction. I talk about, my dad's suicide. And several years after that, I thought that was my destiny. So I tried to commit suicide to get out of my addiction. I thought that was the only exit.
Wow.
And then sitting here just talking about this as well. And, for other people, they might like, whoa, this guy's a mess. But when I do that, there's usually a private message or several people like, oh my God, I'm going through that same thing. I could relate. I've helped people connect with rehabs and, just kind of show them that you're not alone, because I sure as hell felt like I was alone.
Yeah.
And even though I probably wasn't, and there's plenty of people standing around you with their hand out going, come on, grab it. Let me help you. When you're in that mindset, it's a
You're
dark room.
not seeing it.
You don't see anything. They could be standing right in front of you and telling you how great you are, but you're just like, no, I've got all these problems. I'm not great.
Yeah.
And so that's very blurred vision. So I know when I talk about that or just post it's a sobriety anniversary or something, some people will be like, oh God, this guy's got a problem. But a lot of other people that do have a problem are grateful for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is relatability, and it is, again, when we're vulnerable, it opens up the ability to connect with other people for sure. I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but how do you feel like you are coping, or what do you think your positive coping mechanisms for managing the grief are? Like, it's been, yours quite a bit of a roller coaster, but you've had two very different situations, and you were battling, addiction at the same time, right? So at this point, what do you feel like are positive coping mechanisms for you? And then what have you been employing that's been positive in coping with this loss? What do you feel like?
I would say in self-care, really.
Yeah.
Self-care has been a coping
And
mechanism
define that for me.
I am
Yeah.
because my dad, I didn't go into detail, but like my dad is as many people as he helped, my dad didn't take care of himself.
Oh.
So like 3 strokes,
Yeah.
addiction to sugar, until he died, like he was going to eat his sugar. Like it was nothing I could do. And
I'm battling a sugar addiction with my father as well.
Yeah, so it's like these things are like it's like the signs were there. It's like, Pops, like you're not taking care of yourself. It's like if I would put all healthy food in the house, he would wait till I leave. He'd ride his little scooter down to the gas station. He would get some snacks. He'd fill them up in his refrigerator next to the insulin.
Yeah.
Next to the insulin, a bunch of peanut butter cups. And I'm like, Pops, you can't keep doing this. And so from that, it's taught me to, you know what? In an effort to cope, I'm going to find ways to honor my dad. And in honoring him, I feel like the best thing I could do for myself is to take care of me.
Yeah.
Is to, try to break those habits. Like they say, generational curses almost. It's like trying to break those and focus on my health and making sure that I'm getting my blood checked and I know my numbers and what my cholesterol and blood pressure and everything looks like.
Yeah.
So that I could, be a better dad or be here at least longer for my son.
I was going to say.
And my daughter.
Yeah.
So that's been a coping mechanism for me, just being like, okay, how do I right this wrong? Like Pops passed this way. How do I fix this so that I can live longer?
Yeah.
And then how do I pass that down to my son and my daughter,
That's, I think, one of our greatest responsibilities, truly. Like, again, I have 2 wonderful, amazing parents and I love them to death. But as any human, they have their flaws, right? Just like I have my flaws, we have our flaws. And I think one of our greatest responsibilities, or, maybe challenges we're tasked with, is to see what they do. And it's wonderful. And we want to do those things also, and see what they're doing that really isn't the healthiest or isn't the best, and try to kind of right those wrongs for ourselves and for what future children we may have, as a person who loves to like grow and evolve and try to be better. I think that's really what our kind of like greater goal is, And so that was a great point to that. How about you, Chef Pete?
For me, actually going to the doctor and not being so stubborn and avoiding the doctor and pretending like nothing's wrong when my body aches and, and I hobble around or something. So that has become more of a regular thing for me.
Yeah.
Especially, blood work and a little bit more in depth with the doctor and doing things as I get older.
I think about 90% of men are avoiding the doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe 95, maybe 99, but yeah.
And you see that in the cancer statistic, because it's 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women are diagnosed with a form of cancer in their lifetime.
Oh, wow.
Is because men don't go to the doctor and catch it early enough.
Yeah.
They just let it happen. So that's one thing. Yeah, but sharing my story is a big one, and connecting with those people that need to hear it or want to hear it and accept it. And then I'm also physically, I schedule the gym like it's part of my work day. I leave work, I go to the gym, and then after that, I make the rest of my plans, and I make that a priority so that I feel good. And especially if I'm going to tell you about eating healthy and trying to convince you to eat healthy, if I was out of shape and you wouldn't believe it, it wouldn't be believable. So, I want to show and walk the talk and make it believable, because I truly, truly believe in it.
I love that you bring that up, because that's something too, even as a coach, that is so important to me, is that if I'm asking or encouraging my clients to have hard conversations with people they love and cut out some sugar and do all these things that are healthful, right? I have to be doing that. It's one of my worst nightmares for someone to be like, oh, you're going to tell me that, but you're doing the exact opposite. That is ugh, that just makes me die inside. So yeah, I barely drink alcohol. It's very rare. I eat very little sugar, like I'm trying to get 8+ hours of sleep. Like those are really the things that I have to do. I have hard conversations with the people I love. I have to do that because I'm asking people to do those things, so it only makes sense. Back to one of the things that Billy Bob said that I want to address is, how do we accept and, work with our loved ones who are just doing the exact opposite of what we want for them? Like, how do we come to grips and terms with the fact that ultimately everyone has their own ability to make decisions and choices for themselves. And here we are wanting the best for them and wanting a different outcome. And, we can only do what we can.
My aunt told me something that that spoke to that exact thing, because I was frustrated. My aunt had called to check on me. She was like, "How's your dad doing?" And I'm telling her, I'm like, he's stubborn. I'm like, this dude don't want to, I'm finding snacks. And she was like, well, she said, you got to be patient. She said, you got to be patient with your dad and know that this is his life.
Yeah.
She said, he's going to live it the way he chooses to live it. It's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
She said, you would become enemies with your dad if you keep trying to fight him on something that he wants to do.
Yeah.
This is his life. Let him live it the way he wants. And just be there for him. Love him.
Yeah.
Support him, because that's the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
She said, you're going to frustrate yourself and you're going to create animosity.
Yeah. Attention or like a friction. And
friction. Yeah.
I don't want that, right?
Yeah.
But it's such a hard line to toe.
You gotta love people where they are.
I love you so much.
Yeah.
I want you to live forever. Like,
Right.
that's what I want, And at the same time, you're an adult.
Yeah.
And you have all these habits that are, that came before me, right? So, yeah. Well, that was a good reminder, because I think that, it speaks to, again, like the things that we can't control at the end of the day, right? Like, we can literally only control our own words and actions and decisions. That's really about it.
Right.
You see that happening right now. You look all over social media, and we're talking about the political, the elections, right? And people are trying to convince you to vote a certain way.
Oh yeah.
For me, it's in lifestyle. One is lead by example.
Yeah.
Right. So be a good model for what you're asking for. And the second is I frame it as not here's what you should do, but here's my experience.
Yeah.
Because I did something similar to that, and here's my result.
Yeah.
So just kind of putting it that way is less bossy, because people only change when they want to change.
Yeah.
And as much as we want them to change, it's on their terms, unfortunately.
Right.
And some people are for change and just need to see the light, and other people just, like your dad, stubborn.
Right.
Of course. And in one of the other episodes, we talked about how we can always try to plant some seeds. I'm out here just throwing seeds every which way,
Right.
hoping that any one of them sticks to anything. And, that's really all we can do. And if we accomplish that, that's actually pretty good, right?
Yeah,
if
sure.
one of those actually take at some point.
I'm gonna tell you a hard seed that was planted in my life.
Yeah.
I was at the gym, met a boxer, and the boxer, we had a conversation. I got on the Stairmaster, he's on the Stairmaster, and I'm like, Box, I'm like, champ, give me a job. He was like, I don't hire fat people. That's what he said. He said, I don't hire fat people. And I'm like, dang, champ, like that's harsh. He was like, I don't care.
Right.
He was like, if you don't look like you take care of you, I can't trust you to take care of me. And ever since that day, I was like, oh, you know what? I got to take care of me. Because I started thinking, like, how many opportunities did I miss because I looked undisciplined?
Man. Yeah.
And so a lot of times, if you're not paying attention to this, what somebody's saying to me right now may not be for me to be in my feelings
Sure.
or to be mad about. This could be a seed
For sure.
somebody's planting. Somebody
sure.
as successful as he is to say this to me, I didn't get offended. I was like, oh, you know what? Wow, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
And so there's so many people who need these nuggets, these gems from people,
Yeah.
but they don't know how to receive it.
Yeah,
You know, you got to be willing to receive those seeds.
absolutely.
So we can plant them all day, but if a person ain't willing to receive, because I could have took it the wrong way.
Oh,
I
of
could've-
course.
oh, he thought he was. I
Right,
could have
like,
went on
who
social
did he
media.
think-
I
yeah.
met such and such, and
Yeah.
he said, you know, and then, you know, but that's not how I received it as
Yeah.
a seed.
Yeah.
You know, some people not willing to do that.
One of the greatest skills is to be able to find what I say is the kernel of truth in anything someone says to us. Of course, there are people that have malicious intent and, you know, aren't trying to be helpful, and that small category of people we just kind of have to ignore, you know. However, all the rest of the people are saying something through their lens, through their perspective, through all the experiences they've had their whole life. And of course it's biased because our perspective is biased, right? We're all seeing through a biased lens. And there is still a kernel of truth in nearly anything someone says to us, you know? And so I really feel strongly that it's our job to find what that is, whether we like it or not. A lot of times we're not going to like it, because it takes, you know, holding up the mirror and accepting a harsh truth, that we're far from perfect, which we all know. But I love that example because, like you said, you could have taken it, you could have easily just brushed it off or rejected it completely. And I think a lot of people's first reaction is out of hurt to become very defensive and just refuse all feedback or kernels that could then be, you know, turned into a real like moment of self-reflection and a real moment of growth. And I love that example. That was a great one.
Some advice that I was given at one point over the years was that no matter how bad the situation is, find the positive. And so for you, I think hearing that story is like you found the positive, that you got to take care of you, right? And so I think in a lot of those situations, so no matter how heavy it is with our parents' loss and what we're feeling, okay, there's something positive here. So you don't think so at first, but if you take a minute and you find the positive. And I tell that to friends and family that are kind of struggling with the situation, they hate the school they're in, whatever it is like, okay, well, tell me something positive about your day. Like there's something there.
Yeah.
So focus on that.
There's truly pros and cons to everything, as difficult as it is to find those, you know. And I don't know if I've ever really thought about what the pros of the loss of a loved one could be. To be fair, I think that would be a tough one for me to come up with. But you know, situationally, we know there's pros and cons to everything. Even the most wonderful thing, having a new baby, there's so many pros and there's a number of cons. You know, you're tired, right? It is less time for you and your wife, you know, to connect and all these things. So we can see that there are pros and cons to even the best things, right? So then, of course, to the sad or quote unquote bad things, there's going to be pros and cons. You know?
Yeah, those diapers stink.
They do. Oh my
stink.
gosh. Woo. I told my wife, I said, we don't need no diaper genie just to put diapers in. We just put it in the trash can.
Absolutely
no,
not.
we need a diaper genie. Them diapers stink.
You've been out of the game for a while. The diaper genie is a must.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
We got it too. And it's helping. But I'll say this, right? When it comes to finding the positive in death, right? I feel like after death, there has to be new life. And so I feel like finding new life is the positive.
Yeah.
So like if you experience death, it's almost like, okay, I can sit and focus on the death that I just experienced, or I can find out what does new life look like now after this death.
Yeah.
You know, who am I now after this? Because like one thing he said, like, I don't have either parent anymore. I don't have nobody to go back and help. And it's like, for me, I think about like, Dad, you know, my dad was my biggest supporter. If I was ever in a tough spot and I needed a loan, Pops was there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just like now not having that gives me a new mindset to say, you know what, now I have to go out here and make it happen by any means necessary. You know, now I have to go out here and accept this is my new normal. and be ready for when it's my time. Because my son is about to be 18 on Halloween, so it's just like now the roles are reversed. What my dad was for me, I have to be now for my son.
Yeah.
I have to be for my daughter. So I think we just have to find, or as they say, resurrect. You have to resurrect new life for yourself, whatever that may look like for you.
Yeah. So. I like that. I think it's that's probably one of the biggest challenges for people when they're really hurting after a loss, you know? Sure.
So something, ironically, when one morning, this was 2008 maybe, I got a phone call from back east from my sister that said, she texted me, says my grandma wasn't doing well. Mm-hmm. And about an hour later, she's like, call me when you wake up. And then she calls, right? So the phone rings. It wakes up my ex-wife. So she gets up to go to the bathroom. And my sister tells me that grandma just passed away. Mm. And then waiting for my ex-wife to come out of the bathroom, she walks out with a pregnancy test and it's positive.
Wow.
So that phone call woke her up to go to the bathroom to take the pregnancy test. Grandma died, baby's born.
New life.
Yep.
That's really a moment. That's really a memorable moment.
It is, for sure.
A memorable moment.
Wow.
Yeah. To kind of just summarize this discussion, do you guys do either of you have kind of like words of wisdom or words of advice if there is someone watching that just had a recent loss? Kind of what would be your last words for him or her?
I would give the same advice I was given, and that's just to grieve as whoever it is that you are to that person. Grieve as that. If you're a son, grieve as a son. Like, take the time to do it, because sometimes if you kind of brush it off and push through it, one day it'll hit you.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
come.
why am I crying? Why am I dealing with this right now? So it's just like, I feel like take the time, go through it. It's going to come like waves. Ride that wave as it come, and just know that there's a slogan that they have at a church here in Vegas that says it's okay not to be okay. It's not okay to stay that way.
Yeah.
So ride that wave as it come in and realize that it's not going to stay that way, and just accept
it won't last forever.
Yeah.
At least at that same intensity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say ride the wave. That wave come in, ride it. It's okay to ride it.
Yeah.
I feel like some people need permission to know it's okay to ride this wave. It's okay to ride this wave of grief. It's okay to just cry it out right now. One thing that helped me cope too as well is writing. I started journaling my feelings, and I wrote a poem.
Oh, I love that.
My dad died on the 18th of June, and on the 26th of June was his birthday. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a poem as if he was here. Like, but I did it from a standpoint of, all right, you just got your wings. You've had your wings for 8 days now.
Wow.
And I started the poem, wrote the first line, I started crying.
I'm sure.
I had to get myself together and come back. My wife woke up like, you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm just, and then by the time she saw the NP, she was like, oh, that's really nice.
Wow.
And I posted on Facebook, and people was like, oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
So
that's really lovely.
So I use writing to kind of get through it as well.
Well, and I was going to say, that's a way to honor your father, as well. And show really how much he meant to you.
Right.
Yeah. How about you, Chef Pete?
For me, I think it's pay attention to your feelings. Don't stuff them. Don't distract yourself. Take a minute to understand them, and then find somebody that you trust, whether it's a therapist or somebody that you could just talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of power in saying your thoughts and feelings out loud. Yes. And because they feel like a thunderstorm inside of you, but then when you start to talk about it, it turns into a drizzle, and it really deflates the anxiety, the pressure, the stress. So talk about it out loud. And if it's talking to different people, that's one thing. If you feel better, just to write it out and then read it to somebody, and then you could burn the letter, whatever it is. Right. Yeah. So just get those emotions out, and know that it's okay to do that, and don't have those feelings that you're a burden on somebody. You have to feel the way that you feel. And for me, I never did that. I stuffed it inside of me, and you could see behaviors in the future that come from that trauma, or not dealing with it, or it comes up and you kind of sometimes when I talk about it, it's almost like if I'm in the third person, because I don't want to go back and feel what I felt and acknowledge what I felt. So I'll tell the story, but it's just like, I'm telling it about myself,
Right.
not
You
as
created
myself.
distance from it.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think both of your recommendations, are really just to let out some of these feelings and find an outlet in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it's writing. I actually keep notes on my phone where, like, at night, sometimes I'll just kind of be in a mood or be in a funk and just kind of get them out in fragments or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just getting them out somewhere. And like to Chef Pete's point, finding a therapist or a coach or a counselor to work through some of those things with. Great advice for our audience, for sure.
Because when you're paying them, you don't feel like a burden.
You definitely don't.
You're paying for their
No one-
vacation. They appreciate that.
Exactly. No, none of my clients are burdens at all.
Right.
I adore them
Right.
for many reasons.
Right.
Okay. Well, so to finish this up, the question I have for each one of my guests, because I'm a huge foodie, I'm a food lover. One thing that Billy Bob and I bonded over in Baltimore is my favorite Sharif's. So shout out to Sharif's. And one of the first, or actually the first time I met Chef Pete was going to Truth and Tonic, one of the restaurants he oversees on the Strip. So I'm going to ask each of you to share your favorite meal from your favorite Vegas restaurant. And yeah, so I'm sharing a different one each time, which I loved Truth and Tonic. It was a fully vegan menu, which I'm not vegan, but I love vegan food because I'm lactose intolerant. So it just makes it easy knowing that I'm not getting dairy in anything, And Chef Pete has an amazing skill for making beautiful food that actually really tastes good. It's beautiful and tasty. And so in honor of the vegan food, I will say that one of my other favorite places here in Vegas is actually a sandwich shop called No Butcher.
Oh, yeah.
They have amazing vegan sandwiches. And again, I eat meat. I eat beef practically every day because my dad's a farmer in Nebraska. And I love vegan food. So No Butcher is going to be my shout out for today. But please share one of your favorite spots.
Now, does it have to be a Vegas or just in Vegas? Is it like only in Vegas?
No,
or?
Just something that's in Vegas. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Mine gonna be very childish, but one of my favorite spots to go to is in the Sahara Hotel. It's called Chickies and Pete's.
Oh, yeah. I've been, yeah.
And that's because I'm from Baltimore.
That's
so
right.
I love authentic, real crab meat.
Yeah.
And so I like to get their crab fries, the ultimate crab fries.
I love that.
Chickies and Pete's.
I actually have given up eating crab outside of Maryland. Like, whether it says Maryland crab on the menu or not, I refuse to eat it.
You can go to Chickies and Pete's and you'll enjoy the crab
And I'll like
meat.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
You'll enjoy the crab
That's
meat.
kind of a new standard I have set for myself because I don't want to be disappointed.
Oh, I was pissed one time. I ordered some crab fries at another restaurant here in Vegas. I ain't gonna say their name.
Right.
And I asked, I said, "Is it real crab meat?" And the waiter said yes. And it came out and it was imitation crab meat. And I was pissed. Yeah, I was pissed. I'm like, dude, what is this? He's like, just taste it. I'm like, no, I'm not about to taste it.
Absolutely
No.
not.
I already know what it tastes like. I don't want this.
If you grow up or have any time in Baltimore with Maryland crab, there's no turning back. I grew up in Nebraska, so there was a time that I could eat imitation crab meat, and it was fine, but that time is long past.
Yeah.
For sure.
I love that.
Okay, so I've got a few responses to this.
Okay.
One is that if I see linguine and white clam sauce on a menu, I'll usually order that because that's what my mom used to order. And I even put it on a couple menus myself and called it Carol's linguine and white clam sauce because that's my dedication
And
to
that
her.
I was going to say that is a way that you've honored her, which I love.
For sure. The second one, I'm going to plug myself. We've got these braised chicken tacos at the Canyon Ranch Cafe at the Venetian Resort. It's something that I didn't develop in the restaurant. I developed it as a private chef because it's got a ton of onions, garlic, and cooked tomatoes, which are great anti-inflammatories. I add a little bit of saffron to it, some orange juice, some cilantro, and just braise down that chicken. It works great with dark meat chicken. So you're getting your protein out of there to help, for that healthful muscle builds, and all these great anti-inflammatories in there. with a roasted tomato salsa. So again, there's more cooked tomatoes and lycopene and all these other healthy
What is that called again? Hold on. What is that called again?
Hold on. I can't believe he didn't bring this for us. Can you believe this, Billy Bob?
Now I want it.
The audacity that he would sit here and describe this to us and not have brought it for us, right?
What is it called, Chef P?
It's the braised chicken tacos at the Canyon Ranch Cafe.
In the Venetian.
In the Venetian. Yep. We should do the podcast there.
Oh,
right.
Well,
and then
time.
we could eat and talk.
Right.
But that one, I developed for very purposeful food, which is meaningful for me because it's helping people achieve something better.
Absolutely.
And then the other place to plug a restaurant, the tasting menu, especially the vegan tasting menu at EDO Tapas.
Oh yeah.
Is outstanding. It's in a spot that's kind of tucked away.
Yeah.
It's not in
kind of like
real
a little
obvious,
strip mall.
It's not a real obvious foodie centric
and it's small,
place.
where you really have to have a reservation.
You do, and that menu there the chef is outstanding.
Yeah.
And it's something that really stood out to me. I've met a lot of chefs and tried a lot of food and all. So things that are memorable for me, Sparrow and Wolf is another one.
That's a good one too.
Really, really great food. Really, really detailed food.
Obviously, we could talk about food for decades, but it's actually not technically a food podcast. So we'll wrap it up. But I appreciate both of you coming on.
It's a good way to lighten the load.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great way to end a heavy topic of conversation, right? So thank you both so much for joining me today for this topic. I'm really excited to bring this to you guys, the audience, because it is something that I feel like, not a lot of people are talking about, kind of just in general. And so thank you for joining us today on the Piece of Wellness podcast. Please like and subscribe and look out for our next episode. Thank you.